Welcome to another episode exploring concepts on photography that will help you elevate your work no matter what level you're at or what gear you use. I'm your host here, my name is Gabriel Leung, and this channel is dedicated to tutorials using a mentorship style approach focusing on art and design language and helping you to make better photos and better videos. Super excited about today's topic on juxtaposition, a fun and creative way to elaborate your ideas using multiple images side by side. So if you're interested, let's dive deep into it. I have a personal connection with this word because during my freshman year of college, in the first figure drawing class ever, I walked into the room and there was a nude model, and that was shocking too. But suddenly during the class, the professor asked us to stop what we were doing, gather around the blackboard, and think of words to describe a painting, any art vocabulary in our book. And I think my lame contribution was something like color, which was pretty simple. And someone in the back of the room says juxtaposition, which completely blew my mind. I was like, what the heck was that? Juxtaposition. Now, English is not my first language. However, I do believe even if it's your first language, this is a word that not everyone would know or at least understand fully the meaning behind it. And so this is exactly what we're talking about today from the angle of photography. Now, I had to open the Merriam-Webster dictionary just to make sure I get the definition right first. And it says juxtaposition is the act or instance of placing two things or more side by side to compare, contrast, or to create an interesting effect. Now, I want to highlight the last bit, compare, contrast, but lastly, to create an interesting effect. That's something maybe the key to using juxtaposition, and we'll come back to that. For the question we wanted to ask, what is the reason you had to present two that you cannot do with one? A common place to see two images putting side by side together is in magazines or photo book. I'm not talking about newspaper or anywhere that you see two images just happen to be together, okay? Now, if two images are put together in the magazine or photo book, is usually for a particular purpose by the editor. The editor is actually trying to create a framework for you, and our eyes just go back and forth between the two images to draw a connection. Now, that connection is drawn using our prior knowledge and also our personal experience so far in our life to find that relationship. It has a cultural bias to it. It has certain bias that we personally have, but the editor is allowing us to have certain freedom within that framework, allowing our brain to go and wander. Something you might have tried during your childhood is to play the spot the difference game. Spot the difference between the two pictures. We immediately see the two images presented to us as an invitation to find the difference because they are so similar. And there's a fun fact with our eyes is that while we go between the two images, we immediately use one image as the base. Like we kind of assume the left or the top image is like the original image, and then the right or the bottom image is like a secondary. And so we usually find what is changed or added with the second image in comparison to the first. That is quite interesting when we're looking at the idea of juxtaposition and we're using it to present it to someone else. Essentially, juxtaposition is a vehicle for extending or elaborating your ideas, something about the subject, your story, by presenting more than one image. Again, 3+1 tips. Let's get into it. Tip number 1, context. A merit juxtaposition can do for us is adding value to our understanding. Let's say two images of the same subject put together. One image is a straightforward image, let's say this cup. Another image is like a different angle or a much closer look. and you get a sense of the texture or how it's designed. Now notice that two images are actually similar enough that you know what we're looking at, right? You understand what is in front of you, but they are also different enough that we are actually getting a better understanding of what it is. So that's the key to the first point and first tip, context. It adds context to our understanding in order to interpret the subject and analyze it. Tip number 2, contrast. A pretty straightforward one. Anything from color, structure, texture, meaning, emotion, the subject can be completely different. There's still a connection between the two in terms of context that you can see the relationship between them. Let's say, for example, the texture of a rocky surface and that of a silky fabric, you know that kind of emotion, that kind of feeling when you get touching the fabric or touching the rock is completely different, and it actually draws a connection between the two. Another way of using juxtaposition to contrast is presenting two completely different subjects or space and connecting it with line, shape, perspective, using visual language as almost like a continuation between the two images. When they're put together, paired together, especially with no gaps in between, they just kind of come and go smoothly between the two images, but they are of completely different things. So to contrast, the key thing I want to bring out is that there's an immediate difference, but also an obvious connection. Moving along to tip number 3 is imagination. This is the part where we refer back to the dictionary definition when it talks about creating an interesting effect. An example is time passing. Two images of very similar situation but taken at different time. This is an immediate sequential relationship, something basic of any narrative when you're trying to do storytelling. Another way of using juxtaposition for imagination is what I would call suggestive pairing. Suggestive pairing requires a very similar intensity of two images even though they are very different subject or context. For example, the ocean waves pairing with a girl in a dress, or someone reading on a couch very relaxed and the outside rain. The two images are very different in terms of space and content, but the intensity is very similar and we can draw connections between the two easily. So here's the +1 tip. Be careful with the nuance of balance. The +1 tip is to balance your dialogue. What I mean by that is no one wants to see two images with lots of details presented at the same time. Now you would be frustrated to see that. So balancing between details and the lack of details, tangible and the abstract, all these kind of things, heavy and light, look at my videos on negative space. That breathing space is key to any viewing experience. So the nuance of balancing takes practice in order to master the idea of juxtaposition. Again, here's the take-home tip just to get you started, and it's called the near, mid, and far. Straightforward stuff. With juxtaposition, it happens a lot in the post, in the editing process. And you have no idea what you're shooting when you're at the location. You haven't planned that far ahead down the road. So to cover your bases, I would suggest varying your distance with the subject. You can also do that with switching up your lenses with wide, normal, and telephoto. And when you are actually using other techniques, let's say dynamic angles, using negative space to create more breathing space for your work, you're actually covering more of your bases and giving yourself a lot more options when you're back at your desk. So now you have learned the idea of juxtaposition and the concept of image pairing. You want to give this a shot. I want to give you some pointers just to start. Focus on one thing, one place, one location. Don't be too ambitious. Secondly, try to think of anything relating to that one thing and capture those images, even if you have to scratch your brain out. And then finally, when you compare and pair them together, pair related images and unrelated images. So I hope you've learned something new and this video has helped you and motivate you to create. If you have any questions, comments, or photos to share, please do so in the comment section down below. Please like, share, subscribe, and hit the bell button so you won't miss any future contents. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, I will see you in the next video. Peace out.